one thing to have AI for productivity, for workers to use. It's another thing for it to be used to sort of put pressure on the workforce going forward. Because as the Premier said, like in New South Wales, you work for people, we don't work for machines.
Lissie, you run a small business. How effective has AI been for you in surveilling your staff?
Thank you for that question, Stephen.
The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. If you want to join those wonderful supporters of our podcast and financially support our show so we can continue to produce great episodes every week, then we encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and subscribe to join the Patreon community of Socially Democratic. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Wednesday evening on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. It is our monthly mailbag episode for the month of June. That means that our wonderful subscribers to our Patreon channel, is it a channel? I don't know what you call it. Patreon. Send in questions, and then I have two people to answer them for us. And those two people are the Director of Campaigns and Strategy at Unions in New South Wales, Todd Pinkerton. Welcome back. How are you?
Hey, go Stephen. Thanks for having me.
And Managing Partner at Foster, McCrone, Ratcliff and Sims Advisory, Lissie Ratcliff. Welcome back. How are you?
Hey, Stephen. Good, thank you.
Back to back? No, wait. When were you on last? It was 2 weeks ago, wasn't it?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, okay, right.
Standing in for David.
Exactly.
I'm getting pretty jealous. All the shows with Lissie. What happened to where are my side adventures?
Oh, you've got one coming up. You've got one
coming up.
Where are my
side quest podcasts?
You've got a whole live show, Todd.
I got my live show.
Which we'll plug at the end. Oh, well, plug now.
Sorry, I'm just
foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing amendment. Social Democratic coming to Sydney for the New South Wales Labor Conference, the mother of all conferences. Never been to one before. So I've always heard a lot of things about it, read a lot about it throughout the years, seen what it looks like. Looks amazing. So we're doing a live show. You, me, you as in you, Todd, and a couple of special guests. This is going to be good.
Yeah, more to come. And I'm very excited because I've been to a few of the other conferences and I've been to the Victorian one. With all the respect to all of them, New South Wales is by far the best conference.
And I will concede very few things to New South Wales, but New South Wales Labor's state conference is 100% better than ours.
It's big.
No contest.
It's a lot. It's very exhausting, but it'll be good. It'll be a really good live show. It'll be good. We'll have some really good stuff to say.
Absolutely, and it's on the Saturday in the afternoon as a part of the Fringe program at the Sydney Town Hall where the conference is being held. I don't know how I think you just walk in. I don't think you need to get a ticket or anything, do you? You just wander into.
If you're a delegate, very easy, but people register as observers and can come in, and they can usually go to the Fringe events. So yeah, there'll be some advertising around that.
Yeah, great. So get in early because
please come and join us. 4 p.m. Saturday.
It's going to be fun. All right, let's get into our first question. It's from our dear friend, well done Angus, who we love dearly. His question this month is, Labor and the union movement seriously game planning for the possibility of an AI-driven employment crisis, not just distribution or retaining, but a potential near future where AI significantly reduces demand for workers across large parts of the economy? Are detailed policies being developed for that scenario, or is it the assumption still that new jobs will emerge fast enough to absorb those displaced, and that the challenge is simply how best to manage that transaction? I'm going to go to you, Todd, first of all, as our union representative of our mailbag, because I feel like there's certainly some thoughts going on within the broader union movement in Australia about how we tackle AI, and then we can have a bit of a broader conversation about what it all means in a moment. But what are your thoughts on this whole situation going on with AI and its impact it's going to have on the economy?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's not like a softball question to open a podcast. That's brilliant. Look, it is on the mind of everyone, the rapid change on AI. And I think for a lot of people, their first interaction with AI has been, experiencing the joys of ChatGPT, writing their recipe list or their shopping list, or helping them do I think it's helping my in-laws do their holiday itinerary. A lot of people use it, but it doesn't mean that people trust it. And there's, I think, a growing sense now for people who are experiencing the use of AI, particularly in the workplace context, the sort of particularly because the technology is changing so rapidly. Like the ChatGPT of a couple years ago, well, that sort of the large language model stuff that people have been using a couple years ago is just already so much more advanced than it's ever been, and it's not making the same mistakes that people thought it was. So yeah, it's concerning. I can assure you that the union movement thinks about it pretty regularly. I know it's top of mind also for the federal government and how we respond. There's obviously that striking that balance where the technology is coming. Australia's only one part of the global economy and the global labor market. So there's a need, I guess, to think about how we can harness the productivity benefits that AI can bring in workplaces, but at the same time, dealing with the very real challenges that are going to come with the changes that's going to come in work. In terms of that landing, in terms of getting that regulatory model, none of that is aided and abetted, I think, by the companies that run a lot of these AI companies, like them constantly talking about the mass displacement of labor that will come from the use of AI. I mean, some of that is true. Some of that is spin by them to sort of prop up the share price of their companies and push for investment. And some of that is part of the fact that AI companies and the companies that invest in them are so over-leveraged in it as a tech. But when I talk to unions in the space, there's a lot of work already going. And this is probably more to the question as thoughts about what managing the transition is, but it's bargaining. There's a lot of work going on at the moment. I mean, bargaining about the use of AI. There's a lot of work going into ensuring that the benefits of the productivity are spent through what they call like workload protections. So making sure that workers often get, I think a couple episodes ago we talked about the 4-day week. ACTU's trumped that and suggesting the 3-day week. Like, there's a lot of talk about where the benefits of AI are going to come, because if people can get their work done in a quicker period of time, well, that benefit actually should flow to them, not just they work longer using AI for more business, for more return. And then, of course, there's going to have to be some work in reskilling. There are going to be new jobs that come out of it, but there's also going to be some jobs that are going to go in the process. So, look, I'm not necessarily in the doomsday camp that maybe the person, well done, Angus, is suggesting that things are going to change, but things are going to be just rapid, quick, mass displacement of workers. But I do think we have to get a handle on, because even some of the more thoughtful leaders in the AI space are saying that we are starting to reach a point where if we don't get the regulation is not keeping pace with the technological change. And we also face this real challenge, which is, do regulators understand the depths of the technology that we're going to have to regulate going forward? Because, I'm trying to do all my reading about AI all the time, trying to really stay across it, and it is moving so much faster than I think anyone has the bandwidth for. Yeah,
I think that's a really important point, because you're right. It is moving so quickly. I had some work away from the podcast in the tertiary, got some exposure in the tertiary sector with the universities and the regulator within the tertiary sector concerned about university students using AI to cheat on exams. But the argument from a lot of the AI providers was our intention isn't, we don't want university students using AI to cheat, but we want them to use AI to assist them if they're neurodiverse in terms of their learning, to use AI to assist them if they're doing sort of STEM-based subjects, and to enable them to be trained to use AI. So when they go into the workforce are demanding graduates that are coming out of university that are AI literate. And so students understand this and they want jobs. And so they want to make sure that when they go into that job interview, they can say, yeah, I'm across all of it to this point right now. But the universities are saying, no, you can't use AI. And it just feels like it's, regulators, using this as just an example, and I'm sure it's bigger than this. But it feels like there's folks from the 1950s at the universities going, no, you're not going to be using the AI. Whereas everyone else in the industry is like going, no, we need this and we need this kind of now. And it is moving so quickly. And I'm sure there are other examples of that, not just in tertiary as well.
Yeah, and I think to that, I think we also think very regularly when talking about the space, particularly in the sort of commentariat or people commenting about AI, it's very much through it as a tool as a worker uses and what's it going to do to their workforce. We haven't even scratched the surface of the use of AI by management for workplace surveillance. We've all heard horror stories out of America about the use of algorithms to push pick rates on people, to not just displace labour, but to really put the sort of the burden and pressure, this sort of constant workload intensification that can happen from people now working for machines telling them how quickly to work, particularly in blue-collar work, like algorithmic decision-making being rolled out in warehouses, in transport, in logistics, and a variety of other professions. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of like, well, how do you use Microsoft Copilot or how do you use a version of ChatGPT to write a briefing note better or to, summarize your emails and there's some productivity benefits from that. But there's also a lot of stuff that management might be using AI for that I think people would be very, very uncomfortable with. Governments need to be, I think, particularly ambitious in that space. And, I think I talked about it on a previous pod, but the New South Wales government in beginning the regulation around digital work systems that happened earlier this year was considered quite world leading in actually drawing that line and saying it's one thing to have AI for productivity for workers to use. It's another thing for it to be used to sort of squeeze and put pressure on the workforce going forward. Because as the Premier said, like in New South Wales, you work for people, we don't work for machines.
Lissie, you run a small business. How effective has AI been for you in surveilling your staff?
Thank you for that question, Stephen.
She can pull up the logs right now.
I don't think it's done. I don't think we've done that at all, actually. But
not enough.
But I think that's a very it's definitely happening in sort of particularly I think large companies. And as Todd said, it's not going to. There's not going to be less of it. There's only going to be more of it and more sophisticated. I think in terms of from a government perspective and grappling with both the policy and the politics of this whole massive transition, which I don't think any of us understand where we're going to end up on the other side of that yet, because, as you say, it's evolving too fast. But there's always a tension for government about how much bandwidth you spend on the problems that are in front of you and very clear and very urgent and very getting a lot of airplay right now versus solving for the thing that you can see is going to be a problem and is coming down the line, but it's urgent versus important is always a really hard battle, both in bandwidth and resourcing and funding and political capital. And so I think everybody knows that AI is here and it's not going away. And I think broadly people are largely now on the side of, well, we're not, it can't be stopped. So it has to be, it's not if, it's how. And I think there's a lot of work and thinking happening in governments, both in this country and overseas, about what to do about that and what that looks like for the future of work and the future of society in general. But I don't think anyone's got their arms around it properly. And there are a lot of different approaches. Like the US is a much more sort of, light touch regulation sort of environment generally on most things compared to, say, the EU, which is taking a more hands-on regulatory approach. And I think Australia is sort of not quite sure which way we're going. And having to exist in this sort of issue where we've got a massive data sovereignty issue to grapple with as well. So all of the big AI companies are American. So, and again, we're not the only country dealing with this, but if that's going to take over everything about the systems of how we work and how our economies function, and all of that data is going to live and be processed by companies that are American and therefore based there, I think there's a whole lot of range of implications for, sovereignty is kind of all the rage word at the moment around fuel sovereignty and manufacturing sovereignty and energy sovereignty and all those other things. Data sovereignty is going to be a big part of what governments have to grapple with in the next several years as that problem sort of crystallizes, I think. But there's a real tension. I think government can't stop an AI transition and shouldn't want to either, frankly. But a whole lot of jobs are going to disappear. Like, that is absolutely going to happen. I don't think we're only on the edge of that now. We haven't seen that really mass scale impact happen yet, but it's coming, and it will particularly come for, white collar knowledge economy jobs. And there will be a whole lot of other jobs created that none of us kind of know about or can think about right now, but people can't see that yet. And because it hasn't hit, people aren't screaming at the government to fix the problem right now. And there's a whole lot of other problems that they are screaming at them to fix. So keeping that urgent, important balance is really, really hard. And I don't think we're there yet.
No, and I don't even think big business have even got their hands around it. I was reading the other day where they, some examples of some larger business organisations that had reduced their wage bill by, getting rid of a bunch of workers because they were going to invest more in AI, and with the remaining staff encouraging them to use AI. And it turned out that it became more expensive for them because they didn't have the budget for all the tokens that they needed for all of the AI thinking, and had to rehire more staff again because they ran out of money. So even, businesses are kind of not completely understand. I mean, that sounds so simple, doesn't it? Damien, why didn't you add up how many tokens we needed to do the thinking? I just think that similar to, a while ago when we were saying, let's get the kids into coding. Everyone needs to learn how to code.
And now no one needs to know how to code.
Yeah, exactly. So do we get the kids into, just knowing how to use AI properly? And then all of a sudden, I don't know, the next new thing comes along. I'm too old to even understand half this stuff myself, but sometimes it's incomprehensible about how do we actually deal with the rapid change, technologically in terms of workplaces and the general economy. The only other thing I thought about when I flew back I was in Japan last week on vacation, and on the flight home, I'm one to just select films that I've seen 10,000 times for some reason. I don't know why I do that. I don't feel like I need to watch something brand new at 35,000 feet. So I watched The Avengers Age of Ultron, where they create the AI, I think it was Vision. And I'm watching this going, sometimes when you're using like Claude or whatever, you feel like Tony Stark, you're walking in there going, Claude, give me this, give me that, but it's not as sexy because he has it all on this screen where he moves his hands around and stuff. So at the start, I was like, yeah, Claude all the way. But then all of a sudden you're thinking, if you're going to create Vision or the Age or Ultron that goes around and blows up cities, that's not such a great idea as well. So at 35,000 feet, I just started to panic about what AI was going to do. But then in the end, the Avengers sorted it all out. So I'm just hoping that we have some sort of superhuman people to just protect us against the Age of Ultron if that ever transpires. That's my only other thought.
Well, one of my movies that's in that category, Stephen, that I'll watch at any opportunity, including particularly on planes, is Moneyball with Brad Pitt. But that is a story that if AI in its current form had been available at the time that he was, trying to sort out the Oakland A's, that would have been a pretty boring story because they would have just thrown all the data in, uploaded it all in 5 minutes and spat out the answer, and that would have been the end of the movie. So
highly rewatchable film as well. One of my favorite. In fact, it is my number one all-time sports film, all time.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yep. Jerry Maguire is number 2, just to give you some context. And number 3 was Chariots of Fire. Just throwing an old nostalgia one there. Sorry, really don't. The World Cup's coming up. What can you say? All right, let's think. Well done, Angus. Good question.
Another great question.
Okay, the next one is from another good friend of ours, CB Paul, Canberra Paul. It's grounded in the budget. There's a big preamble, which I think Paul's happy for me not to read out, but he's sort of kind of talking about how a lot of the self-interest groups are. Well, Paul first of all says it's been a beautiful big budget by the Labor government, but there's a lot of pushback coming from self-interest groups, particularly small business, but is asking, how our federal Labor politicians are selling this message. Are they doing it in the right way? And I feel like we've talked a bit about the selling of this message in previous episodes. Lissie, you and Jesse the other week on the Feeney Files, we were at length there talking about that for a while. But I kind of want to build it into another question, which is one from Deck Winterton as well. But I mean, let's start with this kind of idea of almost a month now since the budget first was handed down, and we're still having this conversation about has Labor been able to sell this budget well. I read an article yesterday in the columnist section of the AFR by, I can never remember her name, but she just basically shat on the budget and just was now declaring that it was, a terrible budget. Just because you say that doesn't actually mean that. Like, saying it doesn't make it so. I've, won 3 Olympic gold medals in track and field. Can you actually prove it? No, but I said it, so maybe it's true. Like, piss off. It's just, that's what's annoying me at the moment. But where are you, Lissie, right now in reflecting how is the budget landing with a month since it's been handed down by the Treasurer?
So I think that the housing part of the budget, which was the bit that was thoroughly previewed and had the problem properly introduced with a proper political narrative around it and a whole lot of evidence points and a whole lot of other things, that part of the budget I think has landed and stuck and is going to work. And I think that is currently getting drowned out in places by all of the very frenzied advocacy around some of the other changes, particularly around applying capital gains tax changes to non-housing assets. And I think that is the bit, and as you say, Zoom, we have talked about this a bit, but that is the bit the government did not preview. And I'd say, and we've talked about this, the federal governments are usually very good about front running and previewing their big policy changes. That's how they test things to see whether, they're going to get a frenzy or not. They didn't really test this bit. And I think if everybody had their time again, there might have been some consultation done before the budget instead of after the budget, which is what they're doing now, and is what is sort of prolonging this tail on the whole argument, because the consultation was not done prior to the announcement. So there's a whole lot of trying to design the plane while we're flying it happening at the minute, which doesn't have to be a terrible thing. But again, I'd say they didn't lay the table for this part of the story, and so they're having a lot more trouble containing all the arguments about it. And the people who are upset about it all have professional organisations or advocacy organisations, running for their interests. So it's a small business lobby, the big business lobby. You've got a whole lot of very well-connected, well-funded people in that sort of venture capital, entrepreneur sort of space, tech billionaires and others. So there's a lot of resources and a lot of organisation in that part of the economy, and they are the ones who are upset about this. And so they're out there prosecuting their case. And I think the government's on the back foot around some of those things.
Todd, where are you on the budget? We actually haven't had you on the show since it was first handed down. I'm interested in your reflections on how things have transpired since it got dropped.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be loath to disagree with Lissie on the communications challenge that they've had, but I think on the totally agree that on the housing stuff, I think they've absolutely nailed it in terms of people's willingness to accept what's happened and the positioning. And I do think there was probably a little bit of backlash at the beginning. There was a bit of that framing that was coming out of conservative media that, they've pulled the ladder up on people who want to get ahead. But in the conversations I've had with people and what I'm hearing more and more from people, particularly from MPs who are door knocking and from union members, is at least the government's fighting for us. I think there's a lot of prospective homeowners who are not too worried that the government might have eliminated their ability to own their 10th negatively geared property when they can't get through the door on the first. I think that's done really well in the front running. And I think probably Lissie is correct in this, that the CGT has not been as front run, and so it has taken people a little bit by shock. That being said, I know I'm not privy to any of the strategic conversations in the cabinet or whatever, but I think they expected that there'd be a fair bit of pushback on this, and they've definitely given themselves to room. I've seen a little bit of media coverage around some of the negotiations about where they may choose to make some amendments, make some carve-outs or some different protections. Like some of that's got to surely been part of the game plan. But I'm kind of excited to see the government take on a fight. Like I like, it's the sort of thing we've all been talking about for a while, like a Labor government that's prepared to take on a big fight. And the framing that ultimately the Treasurer's been pushing, right, is that we tax capital at such a lower rate than income. Like there's a discouragement from work. Our tax system is essentially set up to say, well, working's a silly way to earn money. What you need to do is you need to go earn profit and extract someone else's income. Like the government wants to rebalance the scales. I'm sure the tax cuts are coming as part of that to help continue to rebalance the scales. But I don't think it's been the wind in the sails for the Libs by any measure. I mean, I think I saw Angus Taylor saying that effectively that Albo's to blame for One Nation stealing all the Liberal votes because of the budget. Like, what an absolute just dereliction of your duties as opposition leader to blame the Prime Minister for making another party to the right of him more politically popular, like as if it's Albo's job to keep Albo and Chalmers' jobs to keep the Libs up. Like, so I don't know. All in all, I think it's been reasonably. I think it does the job. The trick is just keep sticking the landing and just continue to prosecute the case. We're still ages away from another federal election, so we've got opportunities to really make the case to people. And the proof is going to be in the outcome. Like I said, anecdotally, you're hearing about some of the pressure coming out of auctions, about people getting it just a little bit easier in terms of getting into the market. Like it's going to be slowly deflating the balloon rather than the big pop that everyone's now carrying on about, as if that's coming.
Yeah, and I think that's. I think those housing changes, that is the right policy, and it was 100% also the right politics and the right fight to pick. And I think that will stand them in very good stead. Like that is the generational kind of reform that everyone in the Labor Party has wanted to see, and plenty of other people. And I think on the other bit, like the most important thing for them is, like you say, make the changes where you think you need to, and otherwise just get it done. And then move on and go back to talking about the big housing change, the big shift that you're trying to direct in the economy, and so you can stay on message as much of the time as humanly possible.
After we did the episode, the night after we did the post-budget review with Emma Dawson and Madam Triggs, I said on the show, there's going to be a bounce in the polls. This is going to go down super well. How wrong I have been on that one. It's not. It's actually like we've had two polls since then.
A few.
Yeah, and none of them have had it. There's been no bounce whatsoever. It just feels like folks out there don't see the sugar hit, and I know that to the point both of you just said that this is long-term structural reform, and so therefore people aren't going to feel it for a while, and maybe it's going to take months, maybe a year or so before people start to see changes happen to their day-to-day lives in terms of their ability to get into the housing market, and whether or not they're mentally going to be able to connect that moment when they go to an auction and there are less people in that front yard putting their hand up and they manage to buy a home, to that moment back in May 2026 when Jim Chalmers and the Labor government made that announcement. I certainly hope that is the case, but it must be eminently frustrating to see One Nation continue to rise in the polls in the shadow of what has been a pretty good budget.
Well, and I think this is the sort of fallacy of Angus Taylor. Like, yes, he's notionally the opposition leader in name, but the Liberal Party is not currently setting the national agenda on anything. So the government is running a whole lot of the agenda, and One Nation is driving, sometimes deliberately and other times not, the rest of the political agenda in this country right now. And we're into this phase where, the media is sort of in their full fetishization stage about, the rise of One Nation and where it's ultimately going to go, like wall-to-wall coverage and, long reads in all the weekend papers. But to some extent, like Angus Taylor's response to the budget has gone nowhere and is doing nothing to carve out space for his party in this debate.
Slight segue, but something actually did happen since we were last doing a mailbag episode, and this is very much in your wheelhouse, Todd. The national wage case was handed down. Was it 4.5 or 4.25?
4.7, 4.75, I think it is.
Yeah,
4.75. Yeah,
4.75 wage increase. And the Fair Work Commission said, in light of the cost of living and all that kind of stuff, this is the reason why we're doing it. For those folks unfamiliar what this is one of the tenets of our independent arbitration system in terms of setting of wages. So this is for folks that are on an award. So it's folks that are on the the minimum rate or minimum wages or the basic standard. So if you're a worker and you're getting paid under the award, then this wage increase will flow through to you. So it's a great announcement. But it made me think actually, like for the last decade or so, we've been complaining that wages aren't keeping up with inflation. And there's only a certain amount of ways in which we can set wages. And one of them is through the Fair Work Commission every 12 months setting wages. And that's 3 million workers that are on an award. It's a pretty sizable group. Sizable group of workers. And I kind of thought to myself, how the hell have you got off scot-free in this little debate in Fair Work Commission? Because
I wouldn't say they got off scot-free. The employers are definitely not no fans of their decision.
No, I know. And the union movement go in there, the ACTU, and they go and make an argument, and then the employers go in and make an argument against it, and then the independent arbitrator has to then come up with a decision. But in the end, it's their decision, and they have to put their hand up maybe and look back and do a bit of self-reflection, but kind of look back and go, did we fuck that up a little bit? Did we not give enough of a wage increase to the lowest paid workers in this country? Could that have made a little bit of a difference for the way that people are feeling right now in terms of trying to stretch their family budget to make ends meet, because that was kind of our responsibility? I don't know. Am I being a bit harsh there, or?
Yeah, maybe on previous decisions. I mean, in recent, the Fair Work Commission's taken the view that it shouldn't be particularly award workers or workers on the minimum wage shouldn't be the ones who have to pay for inflationary pressure, right? There's obviously a balancing act that everyone has to do, but in most cases, some of the inflationary pressure comes from either supply chain challenges like the fuel crisis or more profit push, where in companies are more engaged in trying to jack up profits at times when it's convenient to do so. It's not usually the case that the award workers are the ones, or the minimum wage workers are the ones who are suddenly like pushing up the price of everything. But it's just what a difference the Labor government can make with respect to award setting. Like it was such a central theme, and not the last election, but the one before that, Albo's role in supporting the position of the union movement in getting a minimum wage increase, and the way that the Libs talk themselves into backflips about whether or not they supported lower income workers having a pay rise in a cost of living crisis. It's really, that whole debate, particularly over the last couple of years, has really opened up wages as a forefront of the sort of the political contest between Labor and the Libs. But yeah, it was a huge announcement. It's a massive victory, particularly for the union advocacy and the work that the ACTU and all of the unions who go in there and have to make the case. And it's not just a pleading or a political piece. There's a pretty sizable economic argument is mounted with respect to making the case for why these raises are good. And the flow-on effect will be people better off or better able to withstand the cost of living pressures that are going on. It's a great victory in that period, and one that hasn't really gotten the attention, I think. All the kind of just carrying on by every, what did Lissie, you were saying before, every peak body advocating for a business right now. Like, there's never been a better time to do government relations against capital gains changes, or maybe one of the worst times. But, but all that carrying on is just completely overweighed this pretty sizable thing that, that'd be game changing. You think about the American context, that kind of win would be game changing there for people.
And I just wonder how many of those people that are on the award and have been impacted by this decision are currently getting surveyed and suggesting that they'll give their primary vote to One Nation?
Well, at least a couple, yeah.
Yeah. And so therefore there needs to be some kind of communication to those communities to say this was negotiated. Well, the government backed in the decision by the unions to ask for a decent wage increase at this time. And it just seems to get a bit lost. Let's go to the next question, which is from thanks, CB Paul. We're just going to segue into the next question, which is from Deck Winterton, which is getting more into the kind of the budget and the challenges of communicating what's coming out of it. Deck sort of said the response to the budget has thrown the biases of our media companies into sharp relief, as much as how much of the comms problem the party faces in communicating policy to regular working people. Is it time for Labor is it time to establish a Labor media ecosystem that goes beyond union TikTok skits, YouTubers, and podcasters? No need to apologise, Deck. And if so, how can we do that when the party and unions are already stretched so thin in comms? I have thoughts on this before I go to maybe you guys. I wonder, my question back to Deck is it a structural problem? And take the example of the recent budget. I think we should give it time. And I think that's what we just sort of spoke about just then is let's give this budget time to bed into the community and not just dismiss it out of hand straight away. And I think about the level crossing removal projects by the Andrews government that was laughed out of town by the chattering class. And, they said, that's a joke. No one's going to give a rat's ass about that. And in the end, they had to build, bleachers for local punters to come and watch the damn thing get built because the people were so interested in it. And to establish like a Labor ecosystem, I kind of think we already have that really when we think about all of the engagement tools that are currently at our disposal, like our volunteer capacity and direct voter contact and relational organising. All the socials, earned media, paid media, to get our message out. I just think that it requires us to ensure that we've got either a policy, an idea, or a message that's consumable and easy to understand in the first place and framed as a values, or as John Armitage would call it, like, that what's the meaningful benefit and how do you communicate that to people? They're the things I think we should be focusing on and not so much. We need to do the TikTok skits and the YouTubers and the podcast. I will point out this podcast is not trying to persuade anyone. This podcast is definitely talking to our own people, although I do know that a lot of the journalists listen to it as well. Hello, everyone. But our aim isn't to persuade people. Our aim is for us to talk to our own people about what's going on. And if you then want to take some of the things you might hear from the show and then go talk to your family and friends, then we encourage you to do that. But we're not here to try to persuade people. This is not a persuasion-based podcast. And it is very much in the Labor ecosystem. They're my thoughts on that. I don't know, Lissie, I might go to you first and then Todd. What do you think about this idea of creating a Labor Party, a Labor media ecosystem, or are we having is it a comms problem that we're suffering right now?
Well, it depends a little bit on what problem you're trying to fix, I think. So if I were randomly a billionaire and looking for good investments that would make me money, I don't know that I would think buying a radio station, TV network or newspaper in this country was going to be a sound commercial investment. However, if I wanted to be able to influence or even control large parts of, content that are landing in front of voters, then maybe I would. And Gina Reinhart has gotten into that business and has just, I think, bought something like 10% of the company that owns, among other things, Channel 7. So there is, and obviously News Corp is News Corp. So there are large conservative ownership stakes in our kind of traditional media in this country already, and others obviously. There is not really, maybe outside of The Guardian, a kind of significant progressive left-wing, whatever you want to call it, kind of maybe counter to that. Now, that may be because we have fewer billionaires on our side of the fence who have that kind of capital to throw around. But I do think it is a bit concerning that we are starting to see more of the traditional media potentially being bought up by conservative, like very conservative, like a One Nation major party donor conservative organisations. But don't have an easy fix for that. But otherwise, Stephen, I would agree with your point that there is an ecosystem that we do have, and whether it's a Labor ecosystem or a progressive centre-left kind of ecosystem, I think it may be different things, because I think there is certainly a progressive digital ecosystem that has a lot of different voices in there, many of whom have a lot of reach and produce a lot of content. I would say a lot of that is not Labor-aligned content necessarily, but it's out there and it is a counter to those more right-wing perspectives. But I think, one of the differences about our Labor movement is that we're a collectivist movement, and that we come out of a tradition of organising, to your point. And I think more of that would be a very good thing for us. Can we build something that is enough to counter billionaires buying up the traditional media? I think that's a very good question. I don't know that I know the answer to that, but I think we should be very careful about where some of that ownership stuff is let to go, particularly while we are the federal government and have a levers around regulation.
Todd?
Yeah, I might deal more with, I guess, like the building of the new media ecosystem than so much the ownership of the previous. Not to say I disagree with Lissie, but I mean, it's interesting that for Deck to sort of call out, not the TikTok skits or the YouTubers or the podcast, but that is kind of where the media ecosystem has to go, right? Like, it's in the new media space where people are consuming. Like, the number of young people now who don't, they're not knowing the number of people listening to free to air or watching free to air is declining. People are watching TV through YouTube. They're consuming most of their news through these little slot machines that we carry in our pockets every single day that are our phones. I think the party and the Labor movement would be better served by a broadening of the sort of centre-left to left new media ecosystem. And I don't think it all has to be perfectly aligned with the party. If anything, I actually think that the key to that kind of material and content that goes well is it's a sense of authenticity. So it's not towing any kind of particular line. It's a sense of what the person actually believe in. But also I think and I think the Labor Party would do well with respect to the new media ecosystem to be a lot more embracing of risk taking. Because some of these kind of, we're talking about some of this is long, we're on a podcast tonight, it's 41 minutes. I'm sure we've said things that a journo would love to write up, particularly to Stephen's point, they're listening. But there needs to be a greater acceptance of, if you're going to engage in proper policy and you're going to talk and be authentic, it's not going to be polished. It's not going to be key lines. It's, too much of the communications in our movement and in the broader sense is so focused on no risk, not whether or not we take the risk of actually connecting with people. You constantly hear about politicians who are talking entirely in sound bites and message boxes and talking points, and if they can't get the message right, they don't say anything at all, rather than just what they believe and say, well, at the end of the day, I might be wrong. We're a big, broad church and movement. Stephen, I quote you all the time about that line about we got to bend, not break. Well, part of the bending is doing that in real time, like telling people, yeah, I advocate for this position, or I think the party could do more in this space, or I'd love to see the unions do more in this space. Like, that's what people got involved in, not to just hear the same thing. So we've got to have a better culture of this risk-taking and this willingness to – people might say the wrong thing. Well, it's not the wrong thing. It's just a thing they said, and it's part of the overall debate. And I do think – and there's very few things I would import from the US political system to Australia, but I do think that there is a greater culture of debate and a willingness that you can just say your piece, and that's just part of it, I think, in the US. Like, I look at some of the new media companies there, like Crooked Media and others, they're just people trying to speak authentically about politics and connect with people every day. And because on the inverse, you never hear of, the right doesn't have the same sense of risk-taking being a problem. For them, they're going to speak their truth, and if that finds their crowd, then that's good. I think we have to get better at just speaking to our crowd, even if it does mean occasionally there's going to be some risk taken and we might not express things perfectly or be perfectly aligned. But we've got to start with the values proposition, not whether or not you're perfect in your execution of the message.
And what
dissent and debate, right? Like, that's part of that is very much part of the American political culture and much less part of ours. And I say that as someone who used to be, in charge of a highly disciplined communications machine. It's a different time now, right? And as you say, Todd, high risk, high reward.
Well, yeah, and also isn't our message better served by having multiple people speak it in the same, in their truth, in their authenticity? I mean, I think for a Labor media ecosystem, and I don't think we should set up our Labor media ecosystem. I think we should have our broader centre-left and our broader left-wing media ecosystem. And there are some great advocates, or there's some great people already doing this stuff, which is really authentic commentary. And there's some really good sort of, I think people call them influencers or content creators or whatever. They're just people who are just speaking their mind and they're finding their crowd because they're being authentic.
Yeah.
And I just think we can't underestimate that. And I just think particularly out of America, and I think increasingly here in Australia, the right seems to have grappled with the idea that to build an audience, you need to speak truth. And I think we need to get a bit better about that on our side as well.
The Center for American Progress, massive left-wing think tank in the US, who we meet with when we do the US mission. In the last session we went over in October last year, their media unit had done some experiments with messaging on various platforms, and they tested, and they managed to get a couple of Democrat politicians to partake in this program. And they got the politician to go on like MSNBC, or MS now it's called, and run a key message in a traditional way that a politician would, so very facts-based and numbers and whatnot. And then they got them to do it on their phone, but narrative-based, so essentially communicating the same kind of points but through story in a horizontal format. And then, so polished, so well edited and looks good, looks like an ad basically, and then got them to do it in their car on a vertical with the seatbelt over. So clearly they're in their car, and essentially the same message, but just talking straight from the gut or from the heart. And then they went and measured the impact of the three messages with a Democratic audience and a soft Trump-leaning but would move audience, and saw which ones did they think was more authentic or more believable or more trustworthy. And you can imagine the one that moved everyone was the vertical in the car, unpolished, unedited. I know it's affirming what we all know. We all know, we're all campaign practitioners. We all know that story is such a far more impactful thing. But why can we still not get our politicians? I mean, there's good examples of it in Australia now, where we are seeing federal and state Labor pollies do more of this work, but it's nowhere near as much as it needs to be, right? We're still dropping millions of dollars in TV ads, polished TV ads. And I think deep down we know that, well, what kind of impact is it actually having? Whereas we should probably be starting to, and I talked about this with Katie Parsons last week. We need to continue, because this was some of the things that came out of the Democratic review, was we are still attached to traditional TV ad buys, and we can't let go of that drug. And all things point to more money into other forms of new media and organising and all that kind of stuff. But anyway,
well, it's the same sort of agonising internal conflict some of us had, I should say, about whether direct mail was still needed to be a massive feature of our election campaigns. And that's, what are we now, more than a decade ago, that kind of all-out brawl was happening in the Labor Party, and one assumes others as well. Mm. And we've kind of moved on from that. We've all moved on from that, haven't we?
Yeah.
But it'll be the same. It'll be the same with this. Like, eventually, the data and the evidence and the results of those who fail to adapt will force everybody into the right direction.
Normally it involves when you get an absolute ass kicking at an election. You all look at each other and go, maybe we should do something different next time. Okay, very good. Thanks, Dec. Great question. Last question is from Gus. It's a quick one. The Bogues Brewery in Tassie is closing down, sadly. Should Jim Chalmers stop fiddling around the edges and actually do the actual hard tax reform and make beer cheap again? My thoughts on this is, why not just buy the brewery? The Labor Party historically have owned a whole bunch of things. The Labor movement owned multiple commercial radio stations. 2KY in Sydney was owned by you, Todd, by the Labor Council of New South Wales.
Not me.
From 1926, 3KZ here in Melbourne was owned by Trades Hall. 4KQ in Brisbane similarly. And newspapers, The Worker in Queensland was owned by the ALP. The Labor Daily ran in New South Wales in the 1920s and 30s. Obviously, Labor government started the Commonwealth Bank, TAA, various state banks. We'll talk less about that one. What happened to them, certainly here in Victoria and South Australia. And obviously we still own a lot of property as well. And I remember the late Alex Gallagher when he was still the secretary of the South Australian Northern Territory branch of the TWU. And I kid you not, he said this at an AGM. He was just bragging about how much money the union had invested in huge tracts of land and actually said, arguably, we're making that much money from the property that we own. We probably don't need actually to have membership fees to come in. To which one of the members said, well, why don't you just drop the fees? And he's like, I'm not doing that. But Alex is quite proud of the fact that he being so shrewd in his investment of members' money to generate more money. So you know what? Let's just buy Bogues. I used to drink Bogues when I was a younger person. It's a good beer. I think we should invest in that. I don't know. What do we think, folks? Should we just start buying breweries?
Is it time for a socially democratic beer? Is that where it's going?
Maybe.
Maybe.
We would need more Patreon subscribers to be fair. We'd invest in that.
It's like the start of a campaign.
And when I say more, I'm talking like a couple of million more.
Yeah, a couple of million and we'll buy a brewery. I don't know. I mean, the question also asked about the tax on beer. I think if it's time for Jim to get into the real tax reform, which is how we make beer cheaper, is probably accurate. And maybe like a helpful next step in telling the story of this budget.
Indeed.
So what I'm hearing out of this is that Stephen, Socially Democratic, is going to buy the Bogues Brewery and then become a massive advocate to Jim Chalmers to change the tax settings on the asset we've just bought.
Yeah.
Great.
We could work that out.
Action noted.
Yeah. Lissie, I'll get you to do the numbers on that one and come back to me at the next AGM.
I don't love our chances.
No. Okay, let's turn to the watch list. This is something new that we've introduced. I asked Todd and Lissie and myself to come up with some things that they're either watching or reading or looking at or just observing and want to share with everyone. So I'm going to, I think I did, who went first last time? I think it might have been, I'm just going to try to be balanced here. I think I went Todd first last week. So Lissie, I'm going to get you first.
All right, I'll go first. So my watch list suggestion for people at the moment is if you haven't read Tony Blair's essay about for and to the UK Labor Party, I strongly recommend, if you are an Australian Labor person, I recommend reading it. I do not agree with a whole lot of what he has said, and I'm sure that most of the listeners to our podcast will not either. However, I do think large parts of his diagnosis are pretty sound, even if I think the treatments are insane. But I think it is an important kind of long-form contribution to challenge people about their thinking about what is the future of social democratic parties, including UK Labor and the Australian Labor Party. What are we here for? And what is the point of the governments that we form and seek to elect? So I think there's lots of – it is also – I will give him credit for this. It is a fully formed, coherent worldview that he has put out there. You can argue about whether it's a Labor one anymore or not, but it also prompted the current UK Prime Minister, someone else who would like to be the UK Prime Minister, to do their own long-form responses as well. And I think people who seek to lead any political party, but Labor parties should be able to put out what their coherent worldview is. And I think the fact that he set off a whole series of conversations around what that future should look like over in the UK is a good thing. I think there's things in there that are worth looking at for us as well.
Where Tony Blair, where do you stand? Where do you both stand on Tony Blair in 2026? Because, I mean, I love Tony Blair, and even when I've been back in Scotland and visiting family who were historically Labor voters, the decisions around going into the Iraq War hang over him and that government like a shit cloud. And I would argue with my cousins going, all right, it's kind of like that, the story, but one got he made one decision around the Iraq War, and that completely just negates all of the great things that his government did. And as a campaigner, I like Blair because he was a winner. Because up until then, UK Labor were a fucking basket case. They were a joke. And he turned them into he and others turned them into a winning machine. And that 97 campaign, just go back and look at that campaign. That was an amazing campaign. Like,
it's a cracking campaign.
Oh my God. Like, that's
great campaign song.
Oh, everything. D-Ream brought them back. And not only modernised the party, but also modernised Britain as well. Like, there are a lot of things that they did that, and I had a big argument with a mate of mine in the New Zealand Labor Party, who's a good friend of the pod, who's actually ironically now working in the UK for the Labor Party, about Tony Blair. And it was one of those, we'll have to agree to disagree. But, I rate Blair, but his legacy is absolutely tarnished. And I think a lot of people read, like you even had to give a caveat there, Lissie, about Tony Blair before.
Well, no, but it's genuine. I think there's a genuine question about whether a whole lot of the stuff he's put out, and like that essay is a long form documentation of a lot of other views he's been putting out sort of, in different places lately. But I think there's a genuine question about does that view still in any way represent what the future of the Labor Party? Because there's a whole lot of people now who say, well, he's no longer a Labor voice because he's moved into this sort of different kind of part of the political ideology. And he talks a lot about the radical centre, which, I've got a bit of time for that potentially as a concept. Again, I think his policy prescriptions are the wrong ones. But, I agree with you in the sense that he made that party electable again after a very long time in the wilderness and should always be given credit for that. He negotiated peace in Northern Ireland. Yeah. There's things like that. There are massive achievements of that government which have stood the test of time. There are also other things that the government did that are not just about the Iraq War, that are more around domestic policy and the economy and the approach to the private sector that I think maybe with the benefit of, the passage of time have not stood up as well. And that is also part of the, contest around his legacy. But I also would resist this kind of, absolutist cancel culture where we have to say, well, he's all bad or he's all good. It's like he's neither of those things. He did good things. He did some other things that are not good. And there's parts of his view now that I agree with and parts that I don't, and that'll be the same for everybody else. But I think it's an important part of the debate. And to Todd's well-made earlier point, we need more voices making more arguments.
Todd, where are you on Tony Blair before we go to your watch list?
I think once again, I wouldn't tend to disagree with Lissie on that. I think you got to take him as the whole person. There's the good, the bad. As a campaigner, he was the right man for Labor at the time, for where it is. But the times have moved on. I haven't had a chance to check out the essay, and I will after the show. Because I think people would look back now and say, well, that's not the Labor Party I'd like to see happen now, and not one that would win an election today, right? And I think attempts by contemporary Labor leaders to cosplay the exact same style and policy as previous Labor leaders has never been who have been successful, hasn't resulted in great outcomes. And actually there's definitely some lessons in the past, and there's definitely some styles and leadership and things, but I don't think it's a model for how you would want a modern Labor Party to govern in the day that we are now. But yeah, there are some policy victories, Northern Ireland being one of the great ones. But yeah, to your point, Stephen, the first thing I thought of is the legacy of the decision around the Iraq War, in a way that it has just overshadowed so much of what happened in that government, the good, the bad, and the middling. But that's been the thing that has overshadowed in so many ways.
And it's also about your surroundings as well, because the other person who actually started the Iraq War, George W. Bush, in some ways because of Donald Trump, a lot of people now are looking at George W. Bush with fond eyes, kind of like...
Yeah, he's aged well.
And because he's best friends with Michelle Obama. He's had this whole kind of second life.
I know.
He's probably more popular now than he was when he was in office, and Blair's gone...
Yeah, just
arguably the other way.
Strange. Up is down and down is up. Todd, thanks, Lissie. That's good. I'm looking forward to reading that myself, actually. Todd, your watch list suggestion.
Mine's going to be a book. But full disclosure, I have not read it at all. I haven't even started, actually. But I'm very excited to read Angertainment by Ed Cooper. I don't know if people have seen some commentary around this, but it's a new book out about, and I know Ed from digital campaigning circles and work, but it's all basically about how social media has kind of not only changed the game, but kind of ruined everything. The way that so much of the discourse, so much of policy, so much of the way that we operate is completely driven by algorithms that we actually have very little insight into how they work and have even less control over how they operate. And I haven't had a chance to read it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets towards the fact that never before has so much of sort of society and culture been driven by the whims of international private companies. And I think there's a lot of lessons in how social media changes people. Like, I wasn't being flippant before about the fact that we basically all carry, maybe a little bit, but we all basically carry around a little miniature slot machine in our pockets that is designed to assume as much of our day as possible. And one of the major drivers of that is our ability to connect to people. And we've never been more connected to people and yet so much isolated. I've seen people comment about we've never before been in such a way where we can quantify the degree to which we are connected to people in a way that is never but more shallow. So I just think it's a timely book in that sense. Like, I think it's really interesting. I'm really looking forward to reading it, and I've seen some of the commentary. I also think Ed's done a really good job of going on new media and spruiking and taking full advantage of just the way the algorithm rewards conflict and criticism more than it rewards genuine connection. One of the people I work with in our social media team sort of summed it to me as like, people are much more likely to get on and write a comment about how they hate everything they've just seen and how much the person doing the content sucks than they are to just write a comment or like it. Like, it is so mobilized towards anger and conflict. I'm looking forward to reading it. I think it'll be pretty good. But full disclosure, I haven't read it, so maybe it's terrible. I don't know.
Tell who is Ed? What's Ed's background?
It could be he works in sort of digital marketing and communications campaign space. He's been a long time. I think he's done a fair bit of work with the labour movement over a long period of time. So he's kind of in the weeds about how do you be persuasive online, and how do you talk to people online and what's happening in online communities.
Very good. And my watch list is.
What have you got?
Yeah, I've got. I actually struggled this week a bit, but I read an article last night in the New York Times. It was a long form article about FIFA president Gianni Infantino, who's basically been spent a number of years since 2018 courting Donald Trump with the view to knowing that eventually the World Cup was going to be in the United States and Canada and Mexico, but in particular the United States. So he's done things like they're renting an empty office FIFA's renting an empty office in Trump Tower. Fantino attended the Trump the most recent presidential inauguration. He tags along with him in state visits. Like, he invented the FIFA Peace Prize to give to Trump after Trump didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize. Like, this guy has gone on a Tony Liberatore tag run with roll for 4 quarters just to ensure that in the end, Trump doesn't disrupt the tournament. So no immigration crackdowns on fans or visa refusals for teams, although there's been some issues in the press in the last couple of days. They quietly dropped because the FBI and the Justice Department had been investigating FIFA with all these corruption cases, and now the Justice Department have quietly dropped it because it doesn't fit the administration's priorities. Apparently there's not going to be any ICE raids at the stadium. So Fantino has got this assurances from the Trump administration that this is going to be a smooth World Cup for FIFA. The conflict here is that FIFA is meant to be politically neutral. It's got 211 member nations. Obviously, football is the biggest thing on the planet in terms of sport. But there's Fantino wearing the MAGA cap at official meetings and doing all this other stuff in which sort of the member delegations are going, I I'm not sure if that's kosher. Particularly the Europeans are not pleased about this. So the Norwegian Football Federation has filed an ethics complaint to FIFA. Not that it's going to get anywhere. Remember Damir Dokic, who was the father of Jelena Dokic, and he used to refer to world tennis as international crime organization. Well, FIFA actually is an international crime organization. It's just amazing just seeing this blurring of politics and sport, and FIFA are the best at it. They are just, it's this long form read in the New York Times. I was reading last night going, good old FIFA up to the they're just very good at it. You've got to kind of admire it from a sort of a politics campaign standpoint. Fantino knows what he's doing. Do I agree with it? No. But just from a campaign standpoint, I've gone, yep.
Highly effective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyway, so I will drop the link in, or Grace, I should say, will drop the link in the show notes. If you have a subscription to the Times, you should read it. And obviously the World Cup starts this week. Go Socceroos.
I think we're going to see a massive productivity crash across certain sectors of the football watching community over the next couple of weeks. It's my prediction.
Yeah. The times actually aren't that bad for the Socceroo games, actually. They're sort of mid-morning. In fact, 2:00, the first game against...
that's 100% my point.
Turkey. Yeah, I don't know. It's a Sunday, though. They've been very nice. It's a Sunday kickoff, 2:00, Melbourne time, Sydney time. Get around it. Anyway. Just a reminder that, as we said at the top of the show, Social Democratic is coming to Sydney. We're doing a live show at the New South Wales Labor Party conference. It's on Saturday, the 4th of July. It's in the late afternoon. When I get specific times, I think do we have a specific time? I can't remember.
I think it's 4:00
in
the afternoon. So like after the day of the conference, after the lunch, before everyone heads to the pub, it's in the sweet spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So come on down. We'd love to see you and meet a lot of our New South Wales listeners. Todd will be there and two other special guests as well. And we're just going to have some fun. Todd, Lissie, thank you so much once again. Loved your work. Look forward to talking to you in a month's time for our next mailbag episode.
Thanks, Stephen.
Next month.
Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.